And you're live.
Okay. I'm going to call to order the Affordable Housing and Community Equity Development Commission meeting for January 23rd, 2025. I'm going to call the roll. Carrie Bond,
Here.
Karen Britton, Elijah Herrick Blaine,
Here.
Rich Halverson,
Here.
and I know that Pat is out of the country, so this is us for tonight. So the next order of business is approval of the minutes. We have two different minutes to approve. The minutes from the October 24th meeting from last year. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll motion to approve them.
Any second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And now the December 4th meeting, our last meeting of last year. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Also move.
And do I have a second? Any second? Karen? Karen, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes of December 4th are approved. We have to do a little bit of a switch because Eric Lashinsky, who's going to talk about the comp plan, is not going to be able to join us until a little bit later. So we're going to go straight to reverse 4 and 5 on our agenda, and we'll have our discussion of the ACDS consolidated plan, which is actually the Anne Arundel County consolidated plan. And Elijah is going to talk to us about it, tell us all about it, what's in it, I'm hoping you'll also talk to us about how we may be able to intersect with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Great. Well, thanks. So as a formality, I just want to clarify that I am a participant in this commission as a resident. But I am currently speaking to you all this evening in my official capacity as Assistant Planning Director. And as such, I'm going to put all participants not currently speaking on mute so that we don't get any feedback. I actually don't have that capability. So Denise, if maybe that's something you could do, is just put everybody on mute.
Can I say something real quick? I'm hearing background noise.
Yes, I was in the process of asking Denise if she might be able to mute everybody. If anybody has themselves not on mute, if you can mute yourselves, I think that should take care of it.
Okay.
Great. Thank you all very much. I look to have sharing capabilities, and so we'll share my screen. But again, just to again clarify, I am doing this presentation this evening in my formal capacity as Assistant Planning Director at ACDS. Following this presentation, I will no longer be speaking as a representative of ACDS and will again be participating as a resident and a commission member. Having said all of that, want to start off by just kind of providing an overall context. I know most of you on this call have a very firm awareness as to what the consolidated plan is, but for anyone joining at home or seeing this online, or for any of us that aren't fully aware, give a little bit of background on who ACDS is and what the consolidated plan is. More than anything, this is an opportunity for you all to provide feedback to Anne Arundel County and to Arundel Community Development Services for the consolidated plan. And so to do that, obviously you can provide comments verbally here, but then also if you see on your screen in the bottom right-hand corner of this first slide, a QR code, you can scan that with your phone's camera. that will draw up the URL to a Google form where you can provide input and feedback that way. Going just kind of into the overall presentation. Sorry, just give me one moment there. You can see a little bit here about who ACDS is. So Arundel Community Development Services was established in 1993, and for the past 30 plus years, we have been in effect the county's Department of Housing and Community Development. As such, we have a variety of contracts with the county to administer and oversee the both federal, state, and local funding related to homelessness, housing affordability, and overall community development. Through that, we have a variety of programming that we operate within ACDS, and that's first-time homebuyer counseling and assistance, foreclosure prevention assistance, weatherization, and energy efficiency, as you can see here, all delineated from property rehab and accessibility modifications to also being the lead agency on behalf of the county through the continuum of care for ending homelessness, eviction prevention, and then also creating and preserving affordable housing opportunities to improve the overall supply of affordable housing and try to improve overall housing affordability across the county. That second to last bullet, we are a seasoned grant administrator as well. We administer about a little more than a dozen different federal, state, and local funding sources. And 4 of those are really engaged in the consolidated plan. So those 4 are the Community Development Block Grant Program, the Home Investment Partnership Program, the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS Program. There is a 5th program that is covered by the consolidated plan, and that is the National Housing Trust Fund. But due to the formula of the trust fund, Anne Arundel County does not receive a direct allocation of trust fund dollars. That comes through the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. But the consolidated plan is a required plan that needs to be submitted on a 5-year basis. And that plan guides the overall funding. It guides the overall activities that we are able to fund with our Community Development Block Grant Program dollars. Moving forward, I'll refer to that as the CDBG program or the Home Investment Partnership Program. Moving forward, I'll refer to that as the HOME program, ESG, the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, ESG, and then HOPWA, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS. And so it guides the allocation of those dollars into specific activities on an annual basis. And every 5 years, we have to develop a new consolidated plan that really tries to account for overall demographic changes and other changes that we've seen within the county over that 5-year period. And it also seeks to incorporate the feedback from the public as to what the public is seeing as changes and needs within the community. And so with that need for the consolidated plan, what we are also at ACDS seeking to achieve is an overarching policy document that looks at our housing affordability strategy from a more holistic standpoint. And I think, Nancy, to your point at the outset, I think that's exactly where this commission or committee, I think we're commission, right? Thank you. Sorry. That's where I think you all can come in on this, is providing feedback to the city council and to the mayor, and to really be asking them to take the actions that would help get the city as best in line with some of the actions that the county has taken, whether that be by funding an affordable housing trust fund or passing something like the county's recently enacted moderately priced dwelling units legislation, much of which we've discussed in previous meetings here, and we are continuing to have those conversations as a commission, of course. So our prior plan had a series of guiding principles, and that is first and foremost to focus on affordable housing. And then next is to really look at providing new units and providing housing assistance for households to move into communities of opportunity. And for communities of opportunity, what we are really referring to are areas that have access to transportation, and jobs, high achieving schools, and overall have a higher level of household income. So within Anne Arundel County, we're particularly talking about those areas just north of Annapolis in the Arnold area, as well as in the Severna Park area. Our revitalization projects and public services, we really want to try and locate those in neighborhood revitalization areas. One big thing I want to point out is that we are seeking feedback about potentially expanding what we consider to be a neighborhood revitalization area. Historically, we have prioritized the Brooklyn Park, Glen Burnie, and Severn areas of the county. The data for some more technical reasons would seem to indicate that we should deprioritize Severn. We at ACDS do not believe that to be the case. We believe it's more of a statistical anomaly. And the feedback that we have received thus far over the course of the consolidated plan process affirms that posture. And so we anticipate continuing to have the Severn area as a neighborhood revitalization area. The area that we think we would like to add is the Maryland City area, kind of south around the Laurel, Maryland City area. That is an area that has an increasing amount of poverty or households with lower incomes. And as such, we really feel it should be included. There are other pockets of where within the data it's clear there are households with lower incomes, especially in South County, particularly around the Wason's Corner area and the Lothian kind of Deal area, if you down in that section. The overall problem that we seem to have received some good feedback on, and if there's any feedback here that you all could offer, it would be helpful, is that there's no real kind of specific area there. There are manufactured housing or trailer park homes in those areas. Beyond doing specific projects there, is it worth going through the effort of adding the whole census block or the whole kind of region down there? Recognizing that might kind of bring about other requirements for us to fund activities down there, which might have the unintended effect of really kind of watering out the available resources. And so as a result, we are kind of leaning towards adding in the Maryland City area, but not adding in the South County areas, while simultaneously recognizing that there is those pockets of need within South County. Prior plan goals you can see here, there are those 7 on the screen, ranging the gamut of home ownership and rental housing to revitalization, as well as, of course, economic stability, community projects and facilities, and, of course, our fair housing requirements. I think the one thing that I will just kind of really highlight is that our community development block grant dollars are required to only spend a maximum of 15% on what are called public service projects. And as a result of that, there is a severe limitation as to what we can do with that money, and the amount of demand really outstrips the available resources for non-capital projects. And as we on this call know, but again, for anyone else that may be watching online or a recording in the future, capital projects refer to kind of bricks and sticks, actually developing affordable housing or preserving affordable housing, whereas public service dollars are non-capital projects. So, for example, we have provided funding to the Boys and Girls Club of Anne Arundel County for their work at Freetown and also over at the Severn Center in the Severn area. We've provided funding to Hope for All, which is a nonprofit that provides furniture to recently homeless households who are moving into housing. We have provided funding to the Department of Social social services to do the homeless outreach. And so those are examples of public service activities that we fund with that limited amount of public service money that we have each year. To put a dollar figure on that, it's roughly $400,000 a year. So it is a very relatively small pot of money, particularly when you compare it to the other resources that are now being made available, especially by the county. The county has made a big effort to make investments in housing affordability, both monetary as well as non-monetary through like the MPDU program that I referenced or ordinance that I referenced earlier. And so those resources really exponentially outstrip the federal resources that we have available for these type of public service activities. So I mentioned at the outset that we really very much want your input. There again is that QR code. And it's primarily in these three areas that we're hoping that you all could provide some feedback. What are the most pressing housing and community development issues? What's changed in the last 5 years? What are the gaps out there? You all are one of about 40 different listening sessions that we have had over the development of our consolidated plan. We most recently held our public hearing on about 2 weeks ago. Actually, I think it was 2 weeks ago tonight that we had that. We'll have another one in February, and very much want people to come to that to provide feedback on these goals and strategies. So I know I went through a lot right there in relatively quick fashion, but I am hoping that we can use the remainder of our time prior to Eric coming and joining us on providing any feedback. So again, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Elijah. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask Elijah or about the plan?
So, so that the super great analysis. So what do they think the steps are moving forward to actually start creating more affordable housing?
Sorry, can you say the first part of that again?
Oh, I said great presentation. Nice
Oh,
work.
thanks. Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
that was great. That was informative to hear what the county's doing. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
But it was a great analysis, but yeah. What are they thinking?
So we are right now, our draft, let me pull that off. So right now, our draft goals and strategies, really, I mean, to be candid, they really are remaining relatively the same. I mean, in the last 5 years, housing affordability, the only thing that's changed about it is it's gotten worse, right? So the only thing that's changed about homelessness is it's gotten worse. It's gotten harder to deal with, right? And so we are proposing as of this moment to have the goals of promoting safe, accessible, and inclusive affordable housing to the county's lowest income residents, to reduce housing and economic disparities across communities, to prevent and end homelessness, promote healthy, diverse, and sustainable communities, and then to implement the county's fair housing plan. And so we are working with a variety of other jurisdictions within the region to develop a regional analysis of impediments that can then be taken and folded into each of those jurisdictions' plans. And we're working in coordination with the Baltimore Metropolitan Council on that. Dan Pontius is a great point of contact for anyone interested in that. So yeah, those are our proposed goals at the moment.
Yeah, that's great stuff.
Elijah, I have a question. And I'm just curious to know, is there any affordable housing being proposed in Anne Arundel County for working families?
Yes.
I mean, I work for the state and I don't, that's neither here nor there, but in all of the years that I worked for them and I watched the development of affordable housing for families, I've never really seen them develop anything in my tenure with the state and then living in the county. Um, I haven't seen anything. I've seen a few senior buildings go up there in Glen Burnie. And nothing much. I haven't seen anything like in the Pasadena area, for working families that's affordable. And I just, because I'm not really in touch with, the state and seeing what they are doing, I haven't seen anything come up in my 20 plus years of living out in this county. And I'm just curious, when are they going to bring more affordable housing into this county? They poured millions of dollars into Prince George's, they've poured it into Howard County, and they've poured it into Baltimore City, but I don't see anything coming into Anne Arundel County. And do you have any insight as to what is being proposed on that side? There's plenty. I see a lot of development coming up along 695 up there is what we call Cedar Hill, but that's not affordable housing. There's not even MPDU that we could help some people get a fresh start. And I'm just curious, are they ever going to do anything out here?
So I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. I think there's the financial side and then there's the non-financial side. So starting with the financial side, in 2023, the city enacted a revision of their deed transfer tax on properties valued at $1 million or more. That has really started to, with that funding going to the county's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So what's unique about that and very good about that is that it is a non-appropriated, dedicated source of funding, right? It's outside the annual appropriations process. It's gonna happen. So I think step one was that, right? Step two was doing some of the revisions needed from a non-financial perspective to incentivize developers to develop more affordable housing. And that's what the MPDU bill does, right? It gives a density bonus in those units that improve the percentage of units that are affordable and makes that requirement for units that I believe is at the 10 unit and above level with increasing amounts above 10 units, a minimum of 10 units or more. So it exempts those 9 or less or fewer, I believe is what that legislation says. And so now that we've got those two, in addition to going through the 5-year consolidated plan process, just like Eric has been coming and talking with us about through the comprehensive plan process, there is a comprehensive plan being done at the county level as well to look at the zoning ordinances and where, quote, upzoning may be able to occur to improve opportunities for density, not requirements for density, to be very clear, but opportunities for density. And I think that distinction is very clear because it's been my experience in the past as a member of this commission that distinction has been confused at times, I would offer. And so I think we are in 2025 finally reaching a point where we've got the key elements coming together. And even prior to 2025, in 2024, we had 7 projects enter our overall pipeline. And so I will just share that also ACDS institutionally has begun to change to reflect this. And we are most recently joined as our chief affordable housing officer, a woman who was previously with DHCD, And so she's very adept at the tax credit process of how to layer in some of these capital subsidies
Mhm.
like home, like CDBG, recognizing the need for operating subsidies to be a part of that. And we've got, with being the administrator of the Home Investment Partnership, the ability to layer in some TBRA through
Mhm.
that, right? And
Mhm.
so I think we're at a very unique moment within Anne Arundel County of having both the leadership at the county level as well as now down into the um, the kind of pragmatic level, the resources and the tools needed to really start moving on that. I think it is very important for anyone who is watching that they engage with their local elected official. And if they believe that housing affordability is an issue that they, their children, their parents struggle with, then I think it is important that they reach out and let their local elected officials know about that challenge, and that they also recognize that that is a result in part of overall market failure, and that it is if it is an issue that you want addressed, then it is something that is required for local government to come in and deal with. And I think increasingly we're hearing from national leaders that really the responsibility ultimately lies with local elected officials and local jurisdictions to take what that we've got and do that. So I know that was a long-winded answer to your question, but I hope that gives you a full spectrum.
So I also want to add, and I don't think you mentioned it, there was something in the county executive's newsletter about a project in Severn for, and so Denise, you might want to sign up for his newsletter because like Elijah was saying, the county executive in Anne Arundel is very gung-ho on providing affordable housing, providing more opportunities, and has done a lot in his tenure to do that. And you can maybe, Elijah, you can talk more about this project. It's a affordable housing project. Is that right? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I am not sure, honestly. So I will be candid with you all. Like I mentioned, I'm not on the development side.
Ah,
That's
okay.
that's not where I am within ACDS. I'm on the grant administration side and the planning side for grant administration. Um,
I'm looking
and
it up now. It'll be in his newsletter that came.
so I collect his newsletters, and so I think I know which one you're talking about, Terry. But I'm trying to go back and find it.
It was
I
interesting.
think you're right. It was just a week or so ago.
Yeah, yeah. And I looked it up because actually I think that that project might have already been under development, but maybe by adding funds or, you know, they brought down the cost of the rents. I wasn't quite sure how it worked.
I'm trying to find it.
I am not entirely sure, but I am going to be scanning through his newsletters, which I get, and I echo Terry's recommendation to sign up for them.
Well, hey, quick question while you guys talk about that. Denise, you talk about those other counties that are getting this done. How are they getting it done and how are they getting past the pushback like we get around affordable housing? What's the
I
difference?
don't know, Karen, if it's Anne Arundel County. Um, I just know that in the course of a 20-year stretch of working for Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, I personally didn't see any family housing being developed. There's plenty of land to develop it on. I
Yeah.
don't know if the county didn't try to lure that type of market, or developers weren't interested in building in Anne Arundel County for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't know the nooks and the crannies of why. I just seen them develop some elderly housing. They did a couple of rad projects on the public housing in Anne Arundel County, but they haven't built anything. You
Yeah.
know, the only place people can live in Anne Arundel County is Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And if
Well,
you,
there was a project in Severna Park, and it was a special exception use, and the community killed it. because of the fear, I mean, I'll just say this out loud,
Yeah,
of getting, low income housing. It's not what it was, but
right.
it was a requirement by the zoning ordinance. I don't know if they still do that. They may have changed it, but it really gave it a hurdle it shouldn't have had to go by,
Yeah.
permitted by right. So, but think, Denise, it's changing with the current leadership. A lot's being done now. So I think it's a new day in Anne Arundel.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it because of the, even the pushback for the MPDUs and how that finally got through. But it's just that it's just been a long time since anything. I can't even name anything outside of the public housing communities in Anne Arundel County that's here. Give
Right.
the name of one project that is privately owned, affordable housing, whether it's under the low income housing tax credit program. And of course, I understand the overlay of home funding and, all of the different layers of affordable housing through the programs that Elijah spoke on, home and tax credit. And then the state of Maryland also has additional affordable state loan programs, but there's just been no development in Anne Arundel County. And as long as, actually, I can only say as long as I've lived in this county, and that's been 30 years.
That's a long time.
That is a long time. So, to your comment, Terry, I'm glad we do have someone that really is interested in doing more for the county.
Mhm.
But it's just I just kind of see like it's a county with potential, okay, that has never really delved into that. And I don't know that the entire county is against affordable housing, so I don't know what it is
Yeah.
that has
So-
prevented them, whether it's lack of interest, whether it's regulations or policies within the county,
Yeah.
because there is none. And I'm trying to wrap my head around and look to see if there's anything that has been developed, and there hasn't, not for families.
Well, part of it is the new housing trust fund there's money now, as Elijah said, there's money now to do those projects. Whereas, the county has tried to keep tax rates low, has limited the spending on things, and providing money for housing. I mean, I'm just surmising it wasn't high
They
on the
don't even
priority.
need,
Yeah.
it's not that they necessarily need money from the county, because developers can go through the state of Maryland and get money through their housing trust, their bond program, low income housing tax credits,
Well, I also
home
wonder,
funds.
Denise,
So
I
it
wonder too if the land value in Anne Arundel is probably higher. I know it's higher than Prince George's, it's higher than Baltimore City, and that's a part of it,
It's not higher than Prince George's.
Oh, Anne Arundel?
Yeah.
Anne Arundel's land value is a
yeah.
lot higher than Prince George's. Yeah,
Stop.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe not in all areas, but I used to work at Prince George's. My son
Okay.
bought a house.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, affordable housing is available in Prince George's.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. And in all of, all
No, but
of
I mean just market rate. Market rate is a lot cheaper in Prince George's than Anne Arundel. We have
No,
very
it is.
expensive, except for up north, and maybe down south.
It
I
is
heard a super
nowadays.
fresh take that I hadn't heard before today. Just talking about having this commission meeting today. And I don't want to say it comes out wrong, but she was talking about the pushback on affordable housing, which people think is Section 8 housing, but it's like, as we all know, it's workforce housing.
Yeah.
He says, great, so they're going to put Crystal Springs in with a bunch of retirees, but wouldn't it be better to have people that were workforce housing? They're going to really pump the economy because they're going out and they're participating. Not that people in Crystal Springs wouldn't, but I thought it was a really new take that I hadn't heard before.
Springs is a retirement community.
That's what I'm saying. She's like, why?
Yeah.
They're going to be self-contained instead of like workforce housing that gets out there and goes out to eat and participates in the community. That's a real generalization, I know. So don't come at me, retirees.
Well,
No.
it isn't no
It wasn't
doubt
my
that
words either. I'm just repeating
No,
it.
I know. I mean, when I worked for ACDS, which was in early 2000, the only thing that were the housing that was being built was senior housing,
Mhm.
tax credit, senior housing.
They did do that.
That's what they did.
No,
Um,
ACDS also did, got Oakwood Family Homes. They
They
got,
do a lot, they did a lot of rehab stuff,
or
but they
Oakwood
didn't do
Family
new,
Homes.
they didn't do new development.
They did. Oakwood Family Homes was a brand new development of 20, I think it's like 22 single family homes. And after the 15-year credit period expires, then the people there can buy the home.
Goodbye.
Okay, that's probably, thank you, ACDS, for putting something in Anne Arundel County. Elijah.
Well, we wouldn't put it anywhere else.
I
Thank
can't.
you. I guess you're in. Yeah, but that's the only one that comes to mind. And I just kind of could never understand why. Okay. I just
I
could never
think,
understand why. So I was looking for the magic answer from you.
I
Yeah.
don't think there is a magic answer.
I don't think there's a magic answer. I will say I don't think I'm the most qualified representative from ACDS to speak to the development history in terms of quantity and location of projects.
I was just
What I will
curious.
say is in the relative short time that I've been with ACDS, one of the things that we have been particularly proud of is the year over year increase in the number of projects that are in our pipeline, which has gone from, I believe, 4 to 7. So, I mean, when you look at it from a percentage, that's a 75% increase year over year. I don't think it's reasonable to anticipate that level of trajectory will be consistent year over year on an ongoing basis. But I think as we're all talking about, the fact I think it is reasonable to anticipate that there will be an upward trajectory. And I think that's the overall conversation that we recognize. I will take this opportunity to kind of lay this out there, and I would appreciate any feedback that you all could offer on this. Is that I think we would all agree that housing affordability is equal parts a supply issue as well as an income issue. And so, in the face of us really talking exclusively thus far about the supply side, I do wonder if there would be support from the community for more of an approach that includes a look at what policies could be done on the income side of things. I guess here's my question. My question is, one, do you agree with that perspective? And if so, what do you feel like might be some policies on the income side that we could look at to improve the ability of the lowest income households within the county to afford housing?
I think you gotta wait for 2028 for that, to be honest.
There are local and state revenue sources that are coming online. I
Like
would
what
point
does that
to
mean?
tax revenue that is generated from the sale of recreational cannabis.
I mean, great. I mean, that I know that revenue is huge.
It's anticipated in Anne Arundel County to be at around $2 million a year.
Oh, not as much as I thought, to be honest.
It's 35% of the overall tax revenue.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think
That's
it's
You
a
haven't
lot of
decided yet
fun.
what to do with it, right? You're still working on how to use it.
We are in the process of standing up our commission. Just to sidestep from that, though, because I'm not asking directly about that, I am just asking about the overall kind of general approach to the issue of housing affordability.
Well, Elijah, in my experience, I can offer this. There are various programs, and if the county wants to create their own programs. They can layer income restrictions so that you have people that are at the lowest, you know, they're at the, and we're looking at the lowest income range, not rent range, but people that are at 30% of area median or less. You develop a pocket of units for that. When you create a development, let's just imagine creating a development. And so you have a range of income. So you have so many units that 30%, and the rents coincide with what the 30% rents are. And you go up on a scale so that you don't create what people perceive as the NIMBY project. And it's looking at a community of working people. Some of them are up here in 80% range, and you can scale and make a development with multiple income ranges, but the rents are going to be restricted. The downside of that is when you're creating this type of deal, you have to look and see if the rents across the board in a 10-15 year period can sustain maintaining and covering all the debt service for the project, so that they're at a 1.0. And sometimes the projections that they give you when they create a deal is not always true, but you have to make sure that however you create it with those levels, that the project can sustain the income, will cover the debt. And so, but that's an idea as far as inclusivity. I don't know if I should be using that word today after yesterday, but to include all different income ranges. You can have market rents, you can have, different scales of restricted rents and incomes based on, restricted incomes. So
I
that
can appreciate that. And I think particularly you're talking about kind of the income averaging within the tax credit program that you can do and things like
not what I'm
that.
talking about. No.
No?
Income averaging will satisfy some of it, but under income averaging, the combination of the below 60% families, because tax credits only go to 60%. So you have to have a combination of up to 80% plus below 60 to come up with an average income that fits in the 60%. Now that's another way of doing it. But however, you can also create communities that actually offer the very low. And sometimes you throw like home funds into a development, so that's going to restrict some of the units. And home can go down to 30%, and I believe up to 50%, but don't hold me to that because I'd have to do my research. So that's a program that could provide the lower, addressing a lower, but you can even offer through the different programs how you will structure your rents based on income and rents.
But so I guess to come back to the original question is, I feel like what I'm hearing from you are a kind of the point that you're making is that there are a variety of strategies that we can use with our existing revenue sources to more deeply income target the developments that we do work on.
Correct.
Did I get that correct?
Well, boy, I could have said that, and that would have saved me a whole lot of time. But that's my thought.
So I guess having articulated that, I would say I understand your point, but I would offer that I think that speaks again to the supply side of how we approach the overall issue. And my question is, do you all believe, based on community need and based on changes in the last 5 years,
Absolutely.
that there would be an advantage to looking at the another side of this policy challenge of housing affordability, not just by looking at improving the supply of affordable housing, but by also looking at ways that we can improve the incomes, increase the incomes of households at the lowest end of the income spectrum.
So let me just
particularly
go.
ELI and
Okay,
VLI.
let's go unconventional. Like, let's say this money doesn't go directly to housing. This money goes towards workforce development. Because then it's more palatable for people who think that people are getting handouts. So now you're developing workforce skills, you're developing skills that create sustainability to be able to afford housing.
Right. But when you look,
Understand?
can I
I'm
check?
sorry, Denise, please go ahead.
I was going to say, but when you look at workforce housing, you have to look at all the incomes of workforce of the workforce, and
Yeah.
the workforce goes all the way down to $10,000
Yes.
up. So even to including workforce housing, you want to include those people at the very bottom of the works.
Guaranteed. And that's exactly what I mean. Like, let's teach.
Yeah, all the
Like I
way
do a
up.
lot with Rise and Shine Bakery. They teach people how to be bakers because the pay scale is higher. You know, like if we can turn that into that, or restaurants or construction or whatever, that teach people a sustainable skill. And I think a lot of it, especially with helping underserved and under income people, is selling it to people that think people don't deserve it.
Well, everybody that goes to work every day deserves to have a roof over their head. So sorry about that. I shouldn't maybe.
I don't think you're gonna
I
find
don't know
many
what you
people
said
on
because my
this call
dogs
to
are off.
disagree with you on that.
So,
I guess let me try and restate it a different way one last time. I guess, Karen, when I hear workforce development, I feel like, I've been using kind of these two sides, right? Like the supply side and then the income side. I feel like the workforce development investments is a secondary strategy around that. And I wonder if what I'm hearing is that, yes, we should look at other ways of improving income for the lowest income. One way might be to improve access to workforce development. And so I guess my final question to kind of reiterate on this is recognizing if we all agree that that is a secondary strategy, are there any primary strategies that you all feel could be used to increase the incomes of households with the lowest incomes, recognizing that's would be one way of addressing the need to improve housing, access to housing, affordable housing?
that's Karen's thing, workforce development, to teach
Yeah.
them
I don't
skills.
know why it's secondary.
Right. If you're trying to bring up incomes before you provide housing, then Karen is number one on the list. Her idea is number one on the list. Give them the skills, give them the the job placement, and help them get to where they need to get, and places that we used to have places like that, at least where I came, where you went to places to pick up workforce skills,
Yeah.
and then they place you in jobs.
So maybe
one-
like I hate to do this, but it sounds weird. And of course, wraparound services to make sure that we're not just saying, oh, well, you've got to work to have housing, which I mean, we all have to work to have housing. But yeah, like this is a housing development that is based on you working as workforce housing project.
Okay. You trying to wrap it right up in there, like you have to have a job to live here, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, like you got to put in the effort
Yeah.
to, and not like put in the effort that the primary point is like lifting people up. Like,
Yeah.
here's your
yeah.
job skill so that you could be successful. I mean, it doesn't mean that you won't ever go without subsidized housing or anything like that, but I think it'd be a good opportunity for people that are looking for an opportunity by themselves but don't know where to go and also need housing. And I know
So-
it's a far reach as we're an affordable housing call, but just trying to think
Right.
outside the box.
Right.
No,
So
it's being hopeful, Karen, and there's nothing wrong with being hopeful of how you do things to help and lift people up. I mean, I think that's a valid point, because if you lift them up and lead them to the water, they'll drink. You know what I'm saying? But some
Yeah.
people don't even know how to even start. And if you've ever really worked in communities that they were trying to implement these type of programs, you can see it, which you can see it more realistically, where you're looking at people that sometimes are hopeless. And they're hopeless because there's no avenue for them to go to grow. And if given the opportunity,
Exactly it. Yep.
then they can move up. So I feel everything you say, and I feel it's more the passion in it, in
Mhm.
the compassion. And thank you for that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I've worked on projects like that, through my
Yeah.
career, and I'm not trying to make it about me, but I've worked on developments where they redeveloped the housing. They provided a job center right there on the site.
I started a program like that in Winston-Salem. Like we needed housing. We brought in volunteers to renovate housing, brought in contractors, we brought in the homeless
Yeah.
people to learn skills. It's just
Yeah.
it's an up
Big-
thing.
Big proponent of all that. And I know to Elijah's point, we haven't really built out a list, and maybe it's a good follow-up note for us to work on. Just note to flag for the group that like I would love to imagine that we could have a universal basic income that would lift a lot of people up. And then I see what's happening in LA when rents double overnight
Oh
because
God, yeah.
the supply
That's
has
just
changed,
corporate
and could
greed.
imagine that without also tackling some policy, just being thoughtful to ensure that as we collectively as a city, county, state do make progress, if we're successful in improving the kind of economic buying power of today's low income earners, that we don't put them in a position where that they become a pass through to higher rents that prey on them.
I'm
So
sorry.
Rich, I
Give me
really
position to what?
appreciate you. Sorry, go ahead, Karen.
I didn't hear the last part. Put them in a position to what?
To be a pass through where any additional income they earn is essentially taxed by their landlord, because
Right.
we've been successful in raising
yeah.
income that landlords take advantage. So to make sure that we're prepared on the policy side as we're thinking
100%.
through these.
So Rich, I really appreciate you making that point. And I think there are two ideas that I would just offer as possible to directly address that. One is a local level renter's tax credit. And then number two, or a state level renter's tax credit. And then number two would be, an increasing number of communities are looking at a minimum piloting and exploring the benefits of some form of a guaranteed income. And so looking at how households use that, and what we have seen in studies within hundreds of communities that have used guaranteed income, is that what those households end up using that money for are three primary things: housing, childcare, and groceries. And so to Rich's point, I think it is important for us to begin looking at policies on both sides of both the supply side, but also the income side, because I do not think it is reasonable to anticipate that in any period of time, we're going to be able to ramp up our development of affordable housing in any way that is going to substantially diminish the gap that we know is out there and is growing. I think it is most reasonable to anticipate that at best we can bend the trajectory of growth of that gap. But then the issue is still how we're going to deal with that gap.
I'm not sure exactly how we can get to your income side though in the comp plan.
So I think I mentioned in my presentation, I apologize. I've literally done this 3 times in the last 4 days. So
The
one of
communities of
the things that we
opportunity.
are trying to do is to create a broader policy document with the development of this consolidated plan that will help guide the overall vision for what the county wants to do to address affordable housing and housing affordability writ large, right? Like kind of, and I think that's the big shift that at least at the city level, we were really able to make, starting with the Housing Affordability Commission, right? Like we We changed the name of it from the Affordable Housing Commission. And I think that's kind of the overall tack that I'm wondering if you all feel is appropriate the county to make as well. Recognizing that there are things on both sides, the county side and the city side, that everybody wants to see done, right? Like the county's making steps on some things, city's making steps on other things, right? So like, where can we kind of encourage each other to try and sync up to the fullest extent possible?
All right. I see that Eric has joined us. So do we have any more comments or questions for Elijah, or shall we turn over to our next topic? Any
Well,
more
Elijah,
questions?
I just want to say thank you. What you presented, your ideas you presented was very, very helpful. It just makes some of us think outside of the box a little bit more as to how we can improve living in both the county and in the city of Annapolis. So thank you again. It was a great presentation. I learned something new today.
Yes, I second that for sure.
Well, thank you all very much. Just to make it official, I am now leaving this meeting as a member of ACDS and rejoining as a resident. I'm going to change my name on the screen to reflect as such.
So Eric has joined us. Thank you, Elijah. And Eric has joined us, and he's graciously agreed to talk to us, sort of an update on where we stand with implementation of the consolidated plan. We go from the bump plan to the consolidated plan.
No, other way around.
Opposite.
Yeah,
Opposite. Yeah. Consolidated plan. Yeah. Okay. The most important thing is we're trying to figure out how we can be of help.
Yeah. I'm sorry I missed Elijah's presentation. I'll have to watch the video because we are starting our city's consolidated plan very soon. So we should check in on what the counties is looking like and see how we can align them. But no, what I'm talking about tonight is how we're advancing the comprehensive plan goals for the city. So I'm going to share my screen here. What I'm going to talk about is our comprehensive rezoning initiative. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So zoning changes, zoning reform is typically one of the most important next steps once a comprehensive plan is adopted by a city or county council. So the county is doing rezoning region by region. As a city, we're about to embark on the same thing. Well, we've initiated a comprehensive rezoning initiative, and we're proceeding carefully and strategically because we want to do things that people will support and will advance the goals. And, you know, when I say comprehensive rezoning, I don't mean that we're changing the zoning of the entire city. We're looking at opportunities within the city all over to change zoning to achieve better outcomes. And so we gave a presentation.
Excuse me, Eric, for one second.
There's some
I can hear some
feedback.
background noise. If we could all mute our microphones, that might be helpful.
That's a good point. Thank you, Denise.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, I was about to say that too.
Yeah, so I don't know who's not on mute, but
yeah. We kicked off this initiative in November. I gave a real kind of off the cuff discussion at, I think, your last meeting, and I was sort of in transit, so I didn't have I wasn't at my computer, but I wanted to give you a little bit better overview. We kicked things off in November at the Planning Commission, and then we gave we're basically every month we're giving a presentation to the Planning Commission to kind of update them at their meeting. And we can kind of do the same with this commission. I think it's important for you all to be engaged on this because housing supply and preservation is a very important goal of this rezoning, perhaps the most important. And, you know, when you look at places around the country that have been successful in reforming their zoning to achieve better housing outcomes, vast majority of them have a very established or newly established housing advocacy organization that really helps to support the goals. And we don't really have that here. I think this commission may be the closest thing to kind of a grassroots organization. I mean, obviously you're aligned with the city and you're part of the city's government, but I think we're going to need advocates to help support what we're doing here and you know, and think critically about it and help improve it. But I'm not going to do this whole presentation. We actually got only about halfway through this presentation to the Planning Commission, and we're going to give the second half on February 6th when we go back. And we're actually tweaking things as we go, but I'm going to jump over a few things. But first, in the city's code of ordinances, when we make changes to the zoning map, it's pretty well spelled out the procedure for doing that. And you can see in chapter 21.34, it talks about application procedures for making changes to the zoning map. And we're addressing number 3 here, comprehensive zoning map amendments. So you can look at that more if you'd like. But we're breaking up our rezoning into 3 phases. And this initial phase, we had initially thought might go through May in hopes of providing some recommendation for zoning changes to the zoning map to the city council before June to allow them to meet a deadline that is set where when we have an election coming up. I'm sorry, hold on just one sec. I got a dog here that's whining in the background. Hold on, let me. Thanks. Sorry about that. Let me go back to the presentation. We've kind of learned very quickly that our phase 1 is not going to be very realistic to really get to a kind of a consensus recommendation to really have city council take anything up that's this potentially loaded. We need more time, you know, and to really get it in front of the right people. And, you know, just it's going to have impacts on various properties. And so this phase 1, this whole schedule is going to push to some degree. But the one piece here that might be realistic to get in front of the city council by May is this plan development code. And that's really those are the guidelines that larger infill redevelopment projects typically use to proceed. The plan development code provides greater flexibility to these infill developments in exchange for working more closely with planning department and the planning commission to get a better outcome for their project. And so, but if you look at that today, and I'll talk about it more, the plan development code is pretty confusing and not very easy to understand. So this is another way of looking at the schedule. These public workshops are going to get pushed out probably to March, but they're going to be coming up soon. And we've even talked about doing kind of like a general education about zoning and the impact that it has. There's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding or not enough understanding about what it is. We created a website about this project, this initiative to do comprehensive rezoning. And really, if you just Google comprehensive rezoning, you'll come to this page on the city's website. And we're putting all of our presentations there on the right side, and links to the PDF presentations. So this is what we mean by, I should have had this as this first slide. Comprehensive rezoning, it's bringing about the better consistency between comprehensive plan, the zoning map, and the zoning code. We talk about the comprehensive plan priorities. These are just some of them and bulleted here. I think housing access for all I mentioned is really one of is sort of the major goal we're trying to address here. But I think if we do it right, we get better neighborhoods too. We get neighborhoods that are more mixed income, walkable, have close amenities close to where people live. We get neighborhoods that are true to the assets that Annapolis already has. We're not, I think we want to build on the kind of neighborhood character that's already here and take cues from housing types that have worked historically in the city. We have an incredible assortment of that missing middle housing. Is, as you all know, a lot of it is not legal by our current zoning codes. That's part of what we're trying to do here. Get back to make Annapolis more Annapolis. This is really the critical exhibit from the comprehensive plan that shows the preferred land use, or the highest and best land use for every parcel of land in the city. And in yellow is residential areas. We're generally saying everything that's residential today should stay residential. There's a lot more green on this map than what would have been in the last comprehensive plan in 2009. We're just sort of acknowledging that the city has an incredible green network. But the red parcels are the highlights for right now. I want to talk about. Those are the areas that we're saying should be mixed use, which means residential plus commercial or office or institutional uses like churches, government offices. In a lot of those areas were primarily identified as office space or commercial in the last comprehensive plan. Today, we're saying these places on our major corridors are too valuable to just be seen narrowly as office space or retail space, but these are places where we could be doing infill housing redevelopment in combination with compatible uses that would make it a better place to live. And then if you look at our zoning map, it's kind of hard to make out real clear patterns of uses. 31 different zoning districts that we've just kind of added to over the years. It's like a table of elements, but perhaps even more confusing. It has some themes. The R zones are residential. The B zones are business or commercial. The C zones are conservation zones, and those are all downtown Annapolis, historic district areas. The P zones are professional office or some combination of professional office. But for a city our size to have 31 different zoning districts is really unnecessary. I mean, cities much, much larger than ours have half this number of zoning districts. And it's just made for a zoning map and a zoning code that's really hard for the average person to understand, let alone an elected official or someone on your commission. So I'll skip over this, but this is, first thing we're saying is we need a new zoning. Even though we're trying to reduce the number of zones, we don't have a zone that is geared towards parks and open space. All of our parks in the city are zoned for other things like residential, even though they're dedicated parkland, and we have lots of conservation areas in the city. They're all zoned for things other than what they are dedicated to be. So this is just kind of low hanging fruit. We're gonna basically put all of the dedicated parks and conservation areas into a zone that can help clarify what is intended for those areas. That's a little bit outside the purview of your commission. But then the main focus here is on zoning district consolidation. And, again, looking at all of these places that are identified in red in our future land use map from the comp plan. The theme here is looking at our major corridors and where mixed use development makes sense. And what we've done is identify within those red mixed use places where we're kind of projecting for mixed use, we're saying, well, what are the zones there today? What are the zoning districts? And do they encourage or allow for kind of mix of uses that would make for really compact, efficient development? And these are the zones that we found are either inconsistent with that vision, they're redundant, outdated, underutilized zoning districts, or they're next to communities that are sort of looking for better outcomes in terms of new development. And so we have about nine zones here that we think we could basically eliminate from the zoning map without a whole lot of consequence tomorrow. But we have to do the analysis to show that. Well, what would those zones become? Well, we have 2 zones already that we think are great candidates to be more broadly applied. One is the MX zone. It's this green along Inner West Street primarily. And then the BCE stands for Business Corridor Enhancement. And that's Chinkapin and Upper West Street and a bit of Old Solomon's Island Road and a bit of Hudson Street. And these 2, this is where they are today. They could be in other places. And so what we've done is just, you can see where they fall on this mixed use, future land use map. So they're squarely within places where we want to have mixed use. And, these are some examples of what kind of development has been produced in these zones. You can see there's clearly a different scale intended between the MX and the BCE. On the one hand, the MX is geared more towards kind of like smaller, granular, urban streetscapes like Inner West Street, and then the BCE is higher density, major corridor development, like this property at Chinkapin and West Street, 1901 West. And both have been pretty successful. Just some more examples of what you'd find in each of these zones. It's a mix of stuff. But what we did is we also looked at, what are the uses that are allowed in these zones that make them really good for mixed use development. And we pulled out, in yellow here, this is in our zoning code, the way we identify the uses that are allowed in each zone. Typically, residential development is broken down into these types of categories: multifamily, single family attached, which are like townhouses, single family detached, 2-family, which is like a duplex, dwellings above ground floor of non-residential uses, so residential over retail. And then this is just a sampling of uses that we think make for successful mixed use developments, that people would want to live close to for convenience. And you can see in most of them, the P means permitted. Here's the key down here. STD means it's subject to standards. So if you want to do a restaurant, you have to meet certain standards that are listed elsewhere in the zoning code. You can see in BCE, we're really not encouraging single family attached homes or detached or 2-family. It's really aimed at just multifamily development. And then MX, all of those smaller types of residential are encouraged, allowed by right. I'm going to stop there for now. I think we get into like much greater detail here. Let me see. Actually, let me go to one example. Then I'll just pause. Like West Annapolis is a part of the city where the residents have been fairly out front in sort of asking for zoning changes to their commercial area, which is shown here on the map, which you can see is zoned as P for professional office, or PM. This is professional office mixed. So it does allow for some mix of uses. This is right here is the Growls Supermarket Shopping Center. So that's a B zone. And we are looking at probably including the B zones in this initial phase consolidation, but in this presentation, we didn't include them. So the P zone, you can see it's in other places in the city along Forest Drive. There's a couple spots along Bay Ridge Avenue. Downtown Annapolis has some, like primarily state office buildings, and some examples of what in West Annapolis is in the P zone today. This is the State Archives building on the bottom, and then a newer office building here on Giddings, I believe. And then the professional mixed office district, also other parts of the city, Germantown area, West Street is right here and here. And then Old Solomon's Island Road has some professional mixed office. And, these are some examples in West Annapolis of what those professional mixed buildings look like today. And, important to acknowledge that some of these buildings, this is a medical office building, West Annapolis. It could be adapted to be a residential commercial building tomorrow, perhaps. I mean, it's not, I don't know exactly what the floor plans look like in this building, but when you look at this without knowing what's in there, it looks like a building that could be residential and commercial. So some of these properties could be retrofitted to produce different outcomes. There could be a perfectly reasonable need for medical offices well into the future in West Annapolis. So I'm not discounting that as a use here, but we think this is an opportunity. This area in general is an opportunity for more housing in combination with other uses. It doesn't necessarily have to mean totally rebuilding a lot, but retrofitting is possible. And if we were to see new redevelopment, these are some examples of what that could look like. This one on the right is already in West Annapolis, recent development on Annapolis Street with apartments above and retail below. It is by no means a housing that is affordable to low or moderate incomes, but what we're trying to see are a greater variety of housing options that don't exist in the city today. And I think as we revise the zoning code, I think I am going to stop here. We're looking at consolidating the zones first, just to purely simplify the zoning map, make more zones identified as mixed use. But then we're looking at changing the language in these zoning districts to perhaps incentivize housing affordability, various options for housing that a developer could be incentivized to produce. And some of that could be done in our plan development code as well, where we could basically say density bonus or something like that, in exchange for housing that is, fixed income or provides more moderately priced dwelling units or something like that. But yeah, so that's that's kind of the direction we're headed. And this presentation just goes to all the different neighborhoods where we see these opportunities to consolidate zoning and produce different outcomes. So I'm happy to take any questions about this this point.
I don't have a
So
question. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I wanted to get into how you see us helping you. Is it for us to go and attend the various meetings or participate in those meetings?
Yeah. So there's going to be some lead time on this. So I think when we eventually get to zoning ordinance that will be, city council will recommend zoning map changes, and that will lead to a zoning ordinance that will be sponsored by council members. At that point, we're going to need a lot of advocacy around these changes, but kind of like leading, and that's where I think, you all could help testify. But I think leading up to that point, we need to have changes that people who are, passionate about our housing challenges, and trying to help see the value. I think the changes that we're going to propose, they need to make sense to you all among other stakeholders out there. But I think if they don't make sense to you, then I think we're not heading the right direction. Like, we already have to kind of go through the planning commission. That's sort of more of a procedural thing, to get, zoning recommendations that are sort of vetted. But I think this commission is also very important as kind of a reviewing body. Planning commission, I think, is going to be looking at things other than housing, just candidly, and they're not going to be solely focused on housing issues, but I think you all are. And
Really, can I add something, Eric? I mean, because your last slide, your last discussion really got kind of where we are in terms of how do we change the ordinance to promote more affordable housing. We had that legislation that didn't go anywhere. Is that kind of thing going to be incorporated, adding a little more density to some of these zones and tie it to providing affordable housing? Is that going to be part of those zoning changes? What we were thinking is, as you move forward with the zoning changes, working with you for the people to better understand that there's low-income housing, there's subsidized housing, and there's affordable housing, and they're all different. So that was the piece that Karen and I talked about. And I'm thinking the task force may have had some good information, or maybe some even good presentations that we could use to be part of that, to promote that housing is so important and the things we can do to promote more affordable housing as part of your outreach, not be separate, but be part of it.
Yeah. At this first stage, the zoning changes, the zoning map changes they're not going to be specifically addressing different housing types or based on income. We're going to be looking at ways of allowing for greater diversity of housing based on density, more places where multifamily or duplexes or just other small apartment densities can exist. There was a map in the comprehensive plan that showed just how much of the city that is zoned for residential today doesn't even allow for a basic duplex. So we're looking at housing typologies more than income levels, I would say, at this stage. But the area where I think we're going to possibly have the ability to look at income restricted housing is in the plan development ordinance, which let me see. I think I have another presentation that talks a little bit.
You would already get NPDUs through those developments, right? You're already.
We get MPDUs only for projects that are over 10 units. And it's basically just 1 unit for every 10, I believe.
So this could be addressing those smaller developments where we don't get anything.
It could, and that was, that's kind of what we were trying to get at with that legislation a couple of years ago. But
Eric, I'm sorry. Aren't the NPDUs for new construction? Isn't that what the code covers, that it's new construction for the NPDUs?
That's right. I think Terry was talking about like new duplexes or triplexes that would not.
Oh, the smaller ones. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
But
sorry.
also less than how many units is it? What's the number of units now?
It's like 10, I think it's 10 is the
I think it is.
threshold.
Yeah. So if it's less than 10 units, then they don't have to provide it either.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when we look at plan developments in the city, they follow these standards. And this just gives you a sense of, when I talk about plan developments, I'm generally talking about the larger developments, but there is no size threshold to a plan development. It just generally doesn't make sense for a property owner or developer to do a plan development unless they have a certain size, because they're going to be more involved. There's going to be a lot more sort of negotiation with planning staff.
It's a complicated process. I mean, we looked at
it is.
the very beginning. I mean, I wouldn't want to. I shouldn't say that, but I want to say
that. But here's where it becomes very valuable. I mean, with a plan development, you can adjust the bulk standards, meaning you can have greater density. You could basically have uses that are not typically allowed in that zoning district. You can basically do things that are beyond what you would do if you were just kind of sticking to the zoning code by right. And so the problem with the plan development guidelines today is that they're fairly confusing. And then it's interesting, like, let's see here. Yeah, so they talk about the kind of community amenities that a property needs to provide in a plan development. It's generally like community open space, parks, playgrounds, common areas. But it doesn't really get into the streetscape environment, and we have all this stuff in the comprehensive plan about complete streets and making housing that is, has really great walkable streetscape in front of it. We don't have any standards for that today in the city. We also have this bike network. We have a greenway network. This is all from the comprehensive plan. And so when you think about making changes to the plan development guidelines, there's obvious opportunities to be much more specific to get, kind of more sensitively designed developments that really cater to neighborhood design and, aren't just kind of inward facing, but are really sort of more public in the way they're designed. The thing I wished, I thought it was in this. Oh yeah, here it is. So I should have started with this slide. This comes directly from the code, the 6 purpose statements for plan developments. And on the left is just a sampling of all the different variety of developments. Some are still in the design stage, like this one in the bottom right is called Parole Place. But it would be at the intersection of Forest Drive and Old Solomon's Island Road, and it got approved by Planning Commission this past year. The Willows is here on the bottom left. All of these have met the intent of the plan development guidelines to varying degrees, and I think the issue, you could point to the Willows as an example of like a project that, because of sort of the vagueness of the plan development intent, you know, it made for a situation where there were a lot of people critical of the Willows. There's still getting all that feedback from somebody. I'm not really sure who it is, but you know, but I'm happy to see the Willows development under construction. We've turned a page on that, but I think a lot of the criticism it got was partly because we, you know, our guidelines for plan developments are pretty vague, and you know, we're trying to get really high quality development. It's very subjective. You know, and one of the criticisms was that it has a lot of parking lots that are sort of dividing the buildings, and where we could have better common space between the buildings, and you know, and that is not really well spelled out in the plan development guidelines. And I think the thing that's probably most important to point out, this number 6, to promote development that is consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan. Well, what are those goals? You know, we could be much more specific about the goals that we want plan developments to meet. And housing diversity could be one of them. You know, there's no reason why it couldn't be. It's a major issue in the city. I think we need to be very specific in how we word that to get, you know, the kind of outcome we want. But
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
One thing I worry about, because I mean, I heard some scuttle about the Willows, is that if you're asking a developer to do affordable housing, or to do a portion of affordable housing, to hold them to the same strict guidance that somebody who's doing private development that can charge whatever they want for the units. I mean, it almost seems like if we want to promote affordable housing, that there needs to be some public involvement in promoting the design and not putting it all on the developer. I mean, we talked about that when we had our legs. I mean, I know somebody who's trying to develop in the Pearl area now, and she's just a small development, and she's being held to all these standards that would be fine if you were a big developer putting in sidewalk. I mean, it's killing the project. And so I guess I just worry about that. When I see planned developments, you usually get bigger projects, more expensive projects. You don't get the smaller kind of projects that maybe would want to do affordable housing.
No, that's a really good point. It's true that a lot of the developers who focus on affordable housing have very, very limited financial resources to do things beyond just the housing itself. And you know, you start to their financial model just doesn't allow for the things that, you know, just generally make for better development. You know, streetscape conditions like this, you know, the Village Greens or Acton Cove, the condos there, or I mean, really any of these have these really great public spaces that, you know, cost additional money. I think that, so the city can do more to kind of come to the table on these. And I think that so I can tell you that we're looking at ways of doing that. And one of the ways is it's going to be reflected in our consolidated plan, but we're really interested in leveraging our CDBG funds. That's the money we get from HUD. That
we know about that, Eric.
Yeah,
we know about that.
I'm glad. I hope so. But you know, I mean, there's opportunities to use those funds for public amenities. We could do that. We could use other resources to come to the table and say, well, hey, we have a developer who wants to do an affordable housing development on a major corridor. They are going to need some assistance to do something better in regard to the public amenities and streetscape, and we can help them out there. But I think that to not have that be to say that like affordable housing development shouldn't have the same sort of quality of life in terms of their amenities and surroundings that like market rate housing has, I think is maybe not the right way to think about it. I think,
well, I don't disagree. It's just how do we fund it?
Yeah.
So then I think maybe that's something our committee can help with, is promote
Mhm.
that there needs to be more public funding of those kinds of things, because we
Yeah.
want to focus on good housing.
Yep.
And the rest needs to happen, but maybe not all on that developer.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, that thinking about that kind of challenge would be really valuable. I think that's it's a formidable thing. And we're seeing it with, there's some interest, along Forest Drive, like not just the Willows, but other sites where the market conditions are sort of favoring projects that are using low income tax credits. And so we don't want to turn those types of projects away. But we also want great development on Forest. We don't want Forest Drive to be just like, a generic suburban strip. We want to treat it as a major boulevard for the city. And that was something else that, I think the Willows got criticism on, that the development design for the Willows is a design that the developer has used in multiple locations, that architect has used in multiple locations in other places. We want distinctive architecture. It doesn't have to be as expensive as high-end, condos, but it can still be designed for a particular place and context, and be something that seems appropriate for Annapolis, and something you wouldn't see anywhere else.
What's interesting about this too, when I was working with the United Way in Winston-Salem, HUD HQS Housing Quality Standards certified, stuff passes here that would never pass in Winston-Salem. So it's interesting talking about like what you guys think is a barrier, which is not it's not here, it would be there. But second question is like, what is the timeline on any of this?
Well, so we're actually working on some changes to this plan development guidelines right now, and it's something. This is probably the one thing that I think we could probably have in sort of draft form by late spring, and it's probably something I'll be able to share with you. But the zoning map changes, I think realistically, we would be looking at early 2026, because, and the big problem is that we have the election. I shouldn't call it a problem, but we have potentially a large turnover on our city council in November.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have new people coming on who haven't been involved in any of the comp plan or any of the discussions that we're having, and we're going to need to get them up to speed. And so that's partly why they put this, there's a June deadline on zoning changes. But then we're going to keep moving on sort of doing our analysis for how we can simplify and improve the zoning map, and create more of these mixed use zones. But I think realistically, to get to like a zoning ordinance that the city in front of the city council, it's probably going to be early 2026 realistically. If we didn't have such, if we didn't have the election, I would say maybe end of 2025. But
that's such a far way out. I mean,
it sounds really far, but it's
for housing.
What'd you say?
I said it's still such a far way out. If you're thinking about people who are struggling for housing, and we can't get anything done for a year plus.
Well, so I don't want to undersell the value of this. If we can change the plan development requirements in a way that is very housing focused, that's one way of getting some immediate outcomes, because there are a number of sites in the city. If you look at the comprehensive plan, there was a spread called major infill sites in the land use chapter, and where we identify a dozen sites in the city that we anticipate to redevelop in the near future, or we would like to see redeveloped. And several of those are active sites today, and they're not. If they're being kind of slowly worked on by their owners. But if we could create a plan development policy that is really geared towards better housing outcomes, I think we could get some more immediate results on some of those larger properties. I think
Yeah.
that we're not going to see the smaller missing middle type stuff. I hate to say it, but it's not going to be an immediate thing. It's probably the most controversial aspect of any of our zoning that we would like to do, which is to say that there could or should be any changes to our residential zoning. We've seen it. We've seen the kind of response that gets. So the only way we're going to be able to address that is through new standards for residential design that kind of give folks some faith that any kind of infill duplex or triplex or something is going to look like there's single family home next door or something. It's like that's really the only way we're going to be able to do it, in my view. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
the immediate focus is on these mixed use areas, because that was really the consensus that came out of the comprehensive plan process from our city council and residents who participated, that the major corridors, particularly Forest Drive and West Street, are full of properties today that could be performing much better, from all kinds of ways, housing in particular. But
And your expectations are that the new development, in fact, you mentioned some that have been approved, that they're going to have MPDUs as part of that.
Oh yeah, that's not going to go away. That'll be
like the new parole development.
Yes.
How many MPDUs are going to be in that? Do you know?
I don't know offhand,
Okay.
but I think 10 to 20 or so.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that we can at least fall back on that. I mean, I was really glad to see Anne Arundel County pass their MPDU ordinance. Doesn't help a lot of the stuff that was already under construction in the parole area, but I think that's going to be a game changer for things happening in the county. So that we can definitely, and that probably could be improved. The policy on MPDUs, should it apply to developments under 10 units? Perhaps. Yeah, I mean, that might be another thing to that's a recommendation in our comprehensive plan to improve the requirements for the MPDU policy.
That could be something we
Yeah.
work on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for years there was a loophole that allowed a development to pay a fee in lieu instead of actually providing the units, and that was corrected. But there still could be changes to kind of create more. I mean, I don't.
Do you know what? Do you know the county? What the county requires? I didn't.
I don't. No. But it would be worth looking at.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I didn't know if anybody.
Yeah. No, I don't know offhand what the threshold is at the county level. It might be higher than what the city has, because
probably.
Yeah, it could be like 20 unit developments. But I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure it's 10.
Okay. That's good.
So
yeah,
I think where we are right now is we've reaffirmed our interest in helping you.
Mm-hmm.
And you should always keep us in mind.
Yeah.
And when you need us, contact us. When you get your draft, you get some draft language on your rewrite of your plan developments. You do other things, contact us even as you're developing it, and we would be delighted to help you and to provide our input and act as your citizen input on as you go.
Yeah.
In many ways. Although we are a part of the city, because we've been appointed by the council and the mayor, we still are sort of that citizen arm,
Mhm.
I think. And I think we can be helpful to you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I will definitely, if you want, you can keep this comprehensive rezoning as a reoccurring agenda item. I mean, I think it's reasonable for me to just kind of, since we're doing these updates to planning commission every month, I can kind of give you the same update, and get your feedback. I'm sorry I don't have any, I know I'm sure you're all eager to see something, tangible that's like, this is really just kind of the analysis phase right now, but I think we're going to have something tangible that would actually look at changing the wording in the code in the next month or two. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
I tried to search out the answer to the number of MPDUs for Anne Arundel County, and what I read is 10 to 15%.
10. Yeah.
10 to 15%. I was just Googling it as you were talking, and what I found is 10 to 15%.
It's 10.
Is it 10?
Well,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know about I'm not talking about the percentage. I'm talking about the number of units that kicks in where MPDU kicks in, and I'm pretty sure it's 10.
Oh, I thought they were looking for we're on a different question. I thought they wanted to know what was the percentage of MPDUs that Anne Arundel County is proposing.
No, I think it's how many units, what's the threshold
Oh, I
when
thought it was the
when
percentage.
it's kicked in. But
in
yeah.
all honesty, I think they need to get rid of that threshold, because that way you can plug in working people into those MPDU units in those communities, like Karen and I talked about earlier. Yeah.
That's something we
I
can look.
don't think there should be a threshold on it.
Well, the city already analyzed all that, so we got to go back. And Teresa's with us again, so Teresa can tell us what the pitfalls might be for doing that.
I would invite her. I would invite her back. She definitely has given it a lot of thought. So,
Yeah.
But my question to you, Eric, is there any reason? Because one of the things we talked about, and it was in, and I think that Elijah's left.
Yeah, he had childcare issues.
So that the city that we should do a informational outreach about housing to the community. And I guess my question is, number one, do you think that's valuable? And number two, when should we do it if we're going to do it?
I think it could be valuable at any time. I think right now it would be fine. I think it's.
But would it really add value to what you're trying to do? I mean, I'm trying to time it with your effort to promote housing, to affordability. This would be just an isolation. I don't, it'd be part of a bigger kind of effort. It makes, to me, at least to me, I don't know about the rest of the committee, it makes more sense.
I think there's like a need for general education about that. I see what you're saying about whether it could be timed with legislation, but honestly,
Well,
I
it doesn't have
think
to be legislation, but part of your effort to make changes. Just thinking about it strategically. That's all I'm saying.
yeah,
Right. And the thing is that if you don't think it's going to be of much, not that it won't be of much value, but that it won't receive the attention it needs unless it's around some specific goal, change, whatever. We're going to have to, whatever our educational program is, it can't just be out there on its own.
Yeah.
It's got to be around something.
Well, one thing you could possibly do at your next meeting is like actually discuss, if you were trying to convince people of the urgency of this issue, or why it's, I don't know, you guys probably do this every meeting already, but like what is the elevator pitch to somebody who's not familiar with the issue? Like, and that could help inform, we can assist with that kind of, we're going to be doing outreach too. And you could help inform that just by kind of helping with some messaging ideas that you think would have some traction. I'll give you, this is kind of fun. Let me show you something. we look at, hold on a second. One of the things in our comprehensive plan that we highlighted the zoning changes that were made in Kingston, New York, and they did a lot of really creative stuff. This is beyond just housing, but let me show you something here. Shoot. Darn it. Hold on a second. Oh yeah, they did these flyers. They and they were focused on creating a variety of new development types that were not very similar situation to Annapolis. Their zoning code was not allowing for a lot of the different development types that people wanted to see, or that would allow for more housing, more amenities, closer where people live. And so they kind of came up with these clever flyers that hit on some of the topics, that came up in their outreach. And, in blue, you could see the large areas that allow for duplexes or fourplexes, or, neighborhood retail, for buying milk or something. But, that's just one example. But I think that,
So were they proposing changes in the ordinance to do that? Is that what those flyers?
yeah, they did a complete rewrite of their zoning code. And they're slightly smaller than Annapolis. I think they're about 25,000 people, but they also have all the historic stuff, maritime. They're comparable to Annapolis in a lot of ways. Kingston was actually capital of the U.S. briefly, or maybe capital of New York briefly, I think. Annapolis was the capital of the U.S. But yeah, so they share a lot of things with Annapolis. I don't think we could, I can't even imagine, rewriting our whole zoning code. But they did it, and they won a lot of awards for it. It's very inspiring.
But they also had consultants that they hired.
They did. Yeah.
I saw that planning presentation on it. And
oh, you did? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they hired, it was an expensive undertaking. I guess one of the things,
a great team. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that might be of interest to folks is how much a new house costs in Annapolis, how much new construction is costing. Really look at the land values and what's happening, and that should get everybody's eyesight that, if your child wants to move here, I mean, this is what, if you want somebody to move in this community, they're not going to be able to afford to do it.
Yeah.
That might be a way to get people's interest.
Yeah. In fact, in that webinar, the person from Kingston who was presenting, I think he mentioned that they had seen home sale prices double since 2019. Rental prices on average had gone up like 70%.
Wow.
Yeah. So they had some really good metrics to kind of point to, but that could be really helpful to us. Like, what do you think would what kind of messaging would really communicate the issue well to kind of a broad audience,
I'm thinking the task force may have had a lot of that.
It might have. Yeah, maybe so.
Affordable Housing Task Force?
Yeah, because they did a lot of that. That's why we got created, partly.
That's true. But
we didn't do any marketing stuff. No messaging stuff.
Yeah, it's real easy to get
no messaging.
No, I'm sorry. What, Nancy? I'm not.
No messaging stuff in there in the Affordable Housing Task Force report.
Well, there were a couple different reports. I'm wondering. I want to talk to Elijah about that, because anyway.
Yeah. Well, there were none in the ones that we did. But yeah, he would have
that's
great
right.
ideas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, put yourself, like put your try to put yourselves in the position of people who are not as engaged on this topic as you are, and like what would communicate
What do people need and what?
yeah,
Yeah.
because I tell people all the time, it's the comprehensive plan was very challenging to get participation on from a diverse cross section of people, because it is not something that the average person does not care about the broader city. They care about their immediate neighborhood, the road, their traffic, to get to places where they have to be. And, the idea of like what should happen in this neighborhood across town from me doesn't really have, but
Doesn't resonate.
Right. The consequence of being an unaffordable city has lots of ripples across our city that, I think that then start to make an impact on people's lives. And that, can make the issue resonate more. But
I totally agree. We actually had that conversation today, a different conversation, but people are largely selfish. I mean, they're in their own bubble. So if you explain to them how this benefits them, like this is how this benefits you and your society and your neighborhood, I think that's a better way to approach it than, yeah, we're going to help these people you don't care about.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, the other piece of this is if you're really talking about just doing the planned development sites, that's a whole smaller fraction of the city. It's not all over the place, like kind of like what we were proposing to allow more flexibility in the single family zones. And the other piece of it though, if people, I know my friends are getting really tired of seeing new housing going up at really expensive prices. And most of us would be really happy, oh, it's going to make my house more expensive, but many of us understand it's pricing everybody out of the market.
Yeah, for sure.
Not giving really value to the community. It's giving value to a smaller percentage. And a lot of those folks don't even live year round in the community, So anyway, that might be some value in that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that we have reached the end of our discussion on this at this moment.
Great discussion. I've been on this commission for I think 2 years now, and this is the lengthiest, most involved one. I loved it.
I agree. But it probably would be helpful, as I said, as you go along, Eric, to just keep us involved, and we'll keep you involved, and among ourselves, we can talk about the whole messaging piece, which was going to be our next item on our agenda, which we've sort of crossed into, which is the education piece and where you guys are, what you've thought of. So, we'll sort of keep each other involved.
Sounds good.
And, if you're doing a presentation to the Planning Commission every month, maybe we should just keep you as a permanent fixture.
Yeah, I think that would be valuable.
And we can do that.
We may also want to watch the Planning Commission meeting.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Eric.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all.
As I said, I think we went in. Is there anything more about the education program, education issue?
No.
Initiative that, okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So we've done that. So we've reached is there any new business that we want to talk about in addition to what we've talked about? I did notice the only new business item I have is I did notice that we may lose one of our big contributors to our issues in Brooks if he becomes the replacement for Sarah.
Yeah, that's true.
He's one of the two candidates, and it seems to me that I guess they do it the same way, which is that whatever the committee is, they look and determine who should replace Sarah.
Is
There
this
are
a
two
replacement for Sarah or Shanika?
for Shanika. Because
Okay.
Shanika's Sarah's replacement.
What's the other candidate?
Correct. Okay, I thought
Shanika is Sarah,
yeah,
and so this would be Shanika.
So
right.
who's the other candidate other than Brooks? I'm out of the loop.
Some 26-year-old.
Oh, like the
No,
assistant to the mayor, I think.
is
Oh,
that what he is?
Yeah.
oh, interesting. Okay.
So we shall see. And now with Ross Arnett
Yeah, I see that.
retiring, and I don't know who else is no longer going to be a council
You're gonna
member.
have almost a whole new administration in the city of Annapolis.
So we'll have a new mayor for sure. So that'll be interesting. All of it.
And then is Rhonda
The mayor's
running?
race isn't this year, is it? No. Yes?
Yeah,
No.
It is this
Yeah,
year.
it is.
This is his
Okay.
last
All
year.
right. All right.
Yeah.
So we shall see. All right, guys. Then I think we have hit the end of our evening. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second? Karen, you're the only one here to second
Second
it.
that. The queen of seconds night.
All those in favor? Aye.
Right.
Nobody's opposed, so that will close.